going to talk about a topic that is very relevant, not just to universities, but also to corporate America. And so when the topic came up, should we tackle something like this? The immediate answer was yes. We need to talk about it and how it ties back to what we do every day. So, Dr. Brown, how are you?
I am doing fine. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here and engaged with you on this conversation.
So why don't we do this? Let's level set first.
Okay.
Talk about the ruling, what it is, and what it means, and then we'll pick up from there. Because I think having some foundational knowledge around it is probably a good thing.
I definitely agree with you. And as you think about this ruling that came out, you have to have an appreciation for the history of this, if you will. So thinking of affirmative action and when it began in the late 60s, early 70s, this was about the trying to offer opportunities, taking into account historical inequities and having a consideration for candidates and what they could bring to an organization. What it was about was not necessarily privileging a group, but saying if you have candidates who are equal, then you will give additional consideration to a candidate if that individual has been the experience historical inequities because of the racial background. That was clarified in the late 70s with the Bakke decision because there were challenges about the extent to which affirmative action could be applied. And the understanding that was developed by that court and that then persisted for quite a bit of time was that if there was a narrow set of criteria that was about the compelling interest for diversifying student body or a profession of some sort, then affirmative action, in a narrow sense, is indeed permissible. All of that then came under a couple of other rulings in the 2000s. One that was very important was ruling in around 2010 or so, involved the University of Texas. And what that said was it did allow a continuation of affirmative action if there was a compelling interest for diversifying, but it also included an opinion that said this is not going to continue forever. Mm. And what just recently happened was that the court picked up on that particular aspect of that ruling and determined that the time for affirmative action and allowing additional consideration had come to an end, and that basically colleges and universities no longer should be taking into account, even as a plus factor, even though all things are equal, should not take that into account in diversifying a student body.
Thank you for that. So there's an argument I'm curious to get your views on. So there's the for and against. Give me your opinion on or your view on both, because some will say, well, this is reverse discrimination.
Sure.
It's race-based. And then there are folks that say we still need those things in place because it's so not leveled certain underrepresented communities. So give me your view on both sides.
Sure. I think it's good to look at both perspectives. And the for perspective really talks about affirmative action being established to address the disparate outcomes that exist between different racial groups. And because you have these disparate outcomes, educational attainment, professional progress, a variety of different outcomes, then you need to have a mechanism to ensure that folks have an opportunity to get and experience those outcomes. So that's generally the for, and folks can couch that in a variety of ways. The against says that when you pay attention to race and you use race to address a racial disparity, isn't that a bit much? Because you're essentially justifying treating people differently because of race. I don't necessarily subscribe to that second view, but I know that's the argument that gets put forth why affirmative action and other things that are race conscious should not be considered when it comes to selecting employees or, in this case, selecting students.
And so how do you think that will impact admissions, the criteria process? What do you think about? And I want to lead that up because the reason why I want to ask that question, because it leads to how they handle it from a PR communications perspective now that the ban is there. So how does that impact criteria right now?
I thought a lot about this because when the ruling came out, of course, I'm at Morehouse College, historically black college, and
Woohoo! My son is a sophomore there.
you, I think that's great. When I thought about that, I thought, well, quite honestly, that makes our mission even more important because what was happening was a lot of institutions were able to rely on the Supreme Court's initial rulings to say we have a compelling interest for using mechanisms to diversify our classes because students learn better and also because that will expose folks to a range of individuals and develop a skill set that will help them later in their professions and quite honestly in their lives. Um, really, the difficulty that comes up now is without that mechanism, now institutions, I'll say universities, but I think institutions, I don't think you can necessarily rely on symbols anymore. You cannot necessarily rely on people recognizing established mechanisms for addressing compelling interests. Now, I think especially as I'm in the room with folks who are focused on communication, the real challenge now is can you communicate effectively what your institutional beliefs and commitments are? Because if you cannot do that in an era when folks are saying, hey, I don't know what's going on, I don't know what it is that would make sense if I can see myself in this place or in what this company does, then you have some serious difficulty.
Yeah.
You can't connect with your audience then.
And so I wrote that down. It's like you're leading right to it, and that's what kind of PR challenges colleges and universities might encounter due to this decision, because there's a legal and an ethical part of it that they have to walk through.
Absolutely. It is, you have to abide by the Supreme Court. I know there are individuals, there's a lot of conversation about how can you enact your compelling interests and still not run afoul of the ruling. But the understanding is we're all law-abiding institutions, so we want to observe the ruling. But the real challenge is, okay, if you're going to observe the ruling and you can no longer rely on people saying affirmative action is present, enables you to get to where you want to go, what are you going to do in terms of communicating? And what I mean by that is, what are the symbols? What are the programs? What are the commitments that students, prospective students and their families who care about diversity, what is it that they're looking for? Are you able to actually communicate that? More importantly, do you have something that proves it? Do you have something that proves it? Because I will tell you, one of the wonderful things about my job is I continually interact with young folks, and I will tell you, young folks are skeptical. They are highly skeptical right now, and so they are of the mind, that's great that you said that, but show me. And I think that's exactly what the challenge is right now. How do you show and how do you communicate what your commitments are? And if they're not what they should be, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, yeah. And so, can you talk a little bit about just some of the, so when the ruling happened, what did you guys do? What was the war room like?
I will be honest with you from the perspective of Morehouse, we were thinking that we're going to see a lot more applications, to be perfectly honest with you.
Hmm.
And the reason why, remember, I just said you've got to be able to demonstrate and signal what your commitments are. Morehouse's mission. Morehouse's mission is based in social justice. It's based in the education of black men to enable them to become leaders and service to society. So we're pretty clear. We've got a clear reputation. We got a clear brand. So for us, it wasn't, oh, wow, our students are going to go away. It became, oh, wow, students who might have gone to other institutions are going to look at us even more. Do we have the resources? Do we have the infrastructure
Mm.
to be able to take it on? So we had conversation with our board of trustees. We had conversation with our leadership group, and it really became, all right, what's the short term? What's the medium term? What's the long term? The long term, we're all still trying to make sense of that. But the
Sure.
short term, we expect to see a boost in applications, which in a way I'm thinking, I feel very conflicted about that because I know that Morehouse is going to be okay, Spelman is going to be okay, other HBCUs are going to be okay, but I am deeply concerned about what it means for the country, though.
So thinking about the PWIs, predominantly white
Hmm.
institutions, if you were giving communications counsel, PR counsel,
Hmm.
what are some of the things that they should be thinking about now to engage diverse communities?
Often when we talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's a strong emphasis on the D. I think people need to start emphasizing the E and the
Mm.
I. And the E, equity. Do you enable equitable opportunities and outcomes for the folks who come to your institution? Are you able to demonstrate that? Inclusion, do the students who are there, do they feel included in the community? Do they feel included in what it is that the school is about? If you can't do that, when folks come to visit, they're going to interact with the students or other folks who have expertise or who have knowledge of that place. And if they don't feel included and they don't think things are fair, then good luck. Good luck moving beyond or communicating a message that will feel authentic. Because again, taking into account what I said earlier, folks are going to be looking for evidence. And so I think the advice I would give the PWIs is think about what you're doing, think about how you might have relied on being able to say we are committed to affirmative action. And now, what do you say? What do you elaborate on to enable that connection to happen?
And so would you say that the internal comms person becomes even more critical in storytelling and the proof points? What's your take on that? Is that something you
Abs-
believe?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. I think shaping your story in a way that connects with those who are looking at your institution, trying to look for particular signals. If you don't have a compelling story that's authentic, I'm not just talking about a story, but an authentic story, I just think you're in real trouble. And as I look out at the audience, I'm thinking this is your wheelhouse. And so then it becomes imperative, how do you connect with the folks who are in various positions of leadership as well as doing the work to tell that story in a compelling way? I think that's going to be the challenge.
Oh, absolutely. And so you and I were talking before this session, the broader impact of this. This is not about getting black and brown faces on predominantly white campuses. This is about longer down the line how it impacts corporate America. And
Sure.
so you want to talk about that a little bit because the numbers could drop. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned we were talking earlier, and I'll put it in the framework I articulated just a little while ago: short, medium, long term. The short term is, quite honestly, we're all still making sense of the ruling. We're still trying to adapt to it. There are ancillary lawsuits happening. Folks are thinking about, what about financial aid? What about summer programs? What about other things like that? So the short term is going to be trying to resolve that. The medium term is going to be, okay, well, now we're seeing some shifts happening. What are we going to do to enact programs? The long term, that's the piece. That's the piece, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm concerned about. And I don't mean that in from just Morehouse perspective. I think in terms of our entire country, what happens if we don't adapt? If we don't adapt, that means that pipeline we've all been depending on for diversifying companies, for diversifying the interactions that happen, that pipeline's going to dry up. The way that I often put it, and I shared it with you
Mhm.
earlier, is that when you approach a problem, there's research that backs it up, but when you approach a problem, I'll give you an analogy. If you're building something, which would you rather have? Four hammers? Or would you rather have a hammer, a screwdriver, a wrench, and a file? If you only have four hammers, everything's going to have to get solved with those four hammers. You're not going to build things that look very well and that are going to be very complex. If you have that full range of tools, you can build a whole lot of different things and be adaptable. That's the concern I have. What happens if we don't have as much difference to tackle those problems that companies and others might face down the road?
Yeah, and yeah, so I think about my role and my colleagues here. We protect brands, we build brands, but it's only you gain that competitive advantage when you have diversity of thought sitting around the table and people from different backgrounds. And so I agree with you. If we start to see the numbers drop of college enrollment of diverse students, it could impact the corporate field. And I mean, look in the room now as far as comms goes.
Yeah,
We got some work to do.
we do.
So I think about that. Um, Preparing students. Um, and so you talk about the Morehouse way of doing it on a national level. Do you see Morehouse playing a role as an advocate? Again, it sounds like you'll have the reverse problem, meaning you'll see an influx of students, which I think is great. Hopefully, more funding comes with that too. But how do you see Morehouse playing a role on a national level from an advocacy perspective?
Yeah, I think what's important, of course, I mentioned that Morehouse might get a benefit from this, but there are other things that we take seriously as a part of our mission. Of course, we're looking to educate Black men and to ensure that we produce graduates who go out and change the world, similar to what Dr. King has done and many others. But one of the things that we take very seriously is that we know that not all Black folks can come and take classes with us. We know that people of color, there are just not enough HBCUs, or I'll broaden it even more, MSIs, minority serving institutions. There are not enough to serve all the students who are in the country. So we feel a calling to try to engage with others. I'll give you an example. We have an advising model that is very much based on connecting with students of color. It's a model, it sounds worse than it is, trust me, intrusive advising. But what that means is we're going to be proactive. We're not going to sit back and wait for students to decide. But we just went to, I had colleagues who just went to a conference about advising. We shared this model, and folks were like, we need to be able to do this because that enables us to connect with our students of color. But what's even more important, it's a different way of connecting with all students.
Hmm.
And so we feel a calling to be able to interact so that we can hopefully share what we've learned with others and benefit not just the students who might come to us, but students in general.
Yeah, yeah. So talk about the storytelling part a little bit more of connecting, because I do agree with you. The other organizations will have to look at how to best connect. Um, how do you do that? What's the best way to put that story together to go to the community? What are some of the things that you need to think about?
Um, I think folks, if maybe I'm feeling too confident, I think folks know their stories, but the real question is, do you know the stories that will resonate?
Mm,
Do you know the stories that will connect? Do you know, for instance, how to connect with someone who has a cultural framework that resonates more with one aspect of your story than other aspects of your
mm,
story? So I think the challenge is that story that is powerful can be delivered to different audiences in an authentic way that speaks to each of those audiences. That's a challenge, I think. And that, I think, for me, it's an exciting challenge because it means that you get to adapt and you won't be able to do things just one way. You'll have to really engage with folks and really study and really be able to go beyond your comfort zone. But I really think that's the challenge, though,
hmm.
is how do you stay authentic,
Yeah,
but you're acting relationally. I think that's the challenge with storytelling, and if you can figure that one out, I think you'll be okay.
yeah, yeah. Um, so going back to the comms role, and I had the opportunity to meet. I'm drawing a blank on her name now. A young lady for Morehouse.
Jasmine Gurley.
Oh, thank you, Jasmine. And that role, was that a role that you guys saw you needed a long time ago, or you guys saw anticipated this coming? and then put someone in place. Um,
Yeah. So Jasmine is our in charge of branding, director of branding at Morehouse, and it is a role that has evolved because we're highly aware of the importance of brand, but we are thinking if you have someone who is responsible for thinking about that, who can then connect with, say, folks like me as a senior vice president of academic affairs, and to think through how can we enhance aspects of things, how can we connect with various audiences. I think that piece is extremely important. So her role is both internal and external. And I think that's a key to be able, I don't know how she does, to be honest with you, to balance both of them.
we all don't know how we do it. Yeah.
I'm having a hard time balancing the internal stuff. So, but she's doing both, and I think many of you are doing it as well.
Mhm.
But I think that's critical because if you don't do the internal piece, you don't know the story,
Yeah.
and you don't connect with the people who can deliver the story. If you don't do the external piece, you don't know who to send the story to or who to communicate it to.
Yeah.
So how you balance that, that's the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall, before we start to take some questions,
Mhm.
so this ruling, it has happened, um, and now we to your point have to look at the after the results of it. What advice would you give to, many of us represent corporate America here? What advice would you give from a talent recruitment perspective?
Sure. You're probably not going to be surprised by what I have to say, but from a talent recruitment perspective, what's your story?
Mm-hmm.
What's your story? How's that going to resonate with the folks you're trying to recruit?
Mm-hmm.
How's that going to resonate with the institution that you represent and the brand that you're trying to portray? How are you going to respond when there might be skepticism? If you don't have the proof points
Mm-hmm.
that enable folks to know this is the place, hey, I can see myself at, and I can see what it's trying to do, and I want to be a part of this. How do you respond to that? How do you help develop it? If you have folks within your organization who could be doing more,
Mm-hmm.
not to the exclusion of the mandate of the organization, but as another consideration.
Yeah.
All of that, I think, is going to be. I think that's critical.
Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Brown. Questions. Questions. Again, we tried to tie it back to comms as much as we could. Um, so
Hi.
questions.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tom Martin. I'm from the College of Charleston. First of all, I was one of the ones who was privileged to tour Morehouse. What a wonderful, inspirational place you got there.
Thank you.
And I think for all those who worry about the problems we have in this country, and they are significant, that to me is part of the solution. But I'm taken with what you had to say about the fact that it's just not enough. And because I think if there were more Morehouses and more hope being given at places like that, we would have a better situation. What can we do as business leaders to help increase um, to make more Morehouses, I guess?
No, I appreciate your question and thank you for coming by and taking a look at what we have to offer. I've been at Morehouse for about 3 years. Of course, I grew up knowing about Morehouse, but I've been there 3 years. It's a powerful place. It's a palpable sense of history, which is just incredible. What I would say for those who are thinking about ways to be supportive, there are 107 historically black colleges and universities in this country. There are even more tribal colleges, Hispanic serving institutions, and the acronym is ANAPISI, but that's focused on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Um, there are multiple opportunities for partnership, multiple opportunities. It could be a range of different things. It could range from, of course, monetary contributions, because quite honestly, most of these institutions are underfunded. It could be that. It could also be partnerships to develop the talent that's necessary to go into industries to ensure that there is going to be a continued pipeline. We made an announcement earlier this week with Prologis. It's a business logistics real estate company, and they just made a contribution of $3 million to ensure that we had a program that would enable us to have real estate as a way of developing opportunities in pipeline. That's one way to do it. We've also partnered with others who didn't give us something along those lines, but they gave of their time and they certainly gave of their network, if you will, at times too. So I think there are a lot of ways to do this. It's not just one way. You can do it as an individual. You can also do it from a company perspective too.
Mhm.
Hi, I'm Deisha Barnett. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at UPS. I wanted to first thank you all and share proud Clark Atlanta University alum, so HBCU
Woo-hoo.
pride over here. UPS is, I believe, the only Fortune 1000 company that has HBCU alum who are officers in corporate affairs, leading communications, and the UPS Foundation. So we certainly are a testament of the power from HBCUs. I wanted to give you an opportunity to share maybe with the audience about how you all at Morehouse are. And by the way, I should say one of our officers is a Morehouse alum, and he's speaking tomorrow because Unique pulled him in. So you guys will get to hear from Malcolm Berkeley. But I wanted to ask you to share a little bit about what Morehouse is doing to help train the future communications leaders. I know Spike Lee has funded a new program. I know you've got people like Nicole Carr teaching amazing journalism courses that talk about the intersection between social impact and journalism. So do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Of course. One of the joys I have as a provost is I get to work across the academic disciplines at the college, and you gave me the opening to talk about two disciplines, but honestly, this is a wonderful thing about working at Morehouse. We're a liberal arts college. So what a liberal arts college means is that even if their major, students' majors here, we educate them broadly so they can be flexible to be able to do a range of things. But picking up on something you said, we have a journalism and sports, social justice and culture program, department, I should say. And you're absolutely right. It's supported by Spike Lee. It's supported by a number of folks who see the value in producing journalists and producing folks who will look at a variety of different perspectives to go into a field to be able to tell stories, to be able to investigate, and to be able to connect with folks. We also have communication studies, which of course offers an opportunity for folks to understand the field as a whole. And we do end up producing graduates who go and are engaged in some pretty amazing things, either on their own or as a part of companies and places you would not expect. So a lot of what we do, we are making specific contributions in communications, but we are also broadly educating our students to be eloquent and stating the needs of different communities and the needs of different companies and what they're trying to achieve. So thank you, and Clark Atlanta. All right, there we go.
Am I next? Okay.
Yep.
Dr. Brown, thank you so much for being here today. Cherry Buyer with Wells Fargo. I went to both an HBCU, Lincoln University, sorry about that, and Temple University, which is a national white organization.
Mhm.
So are there any other efforts that you find yourself in, between partnerships or collaborations between HBCUs and NWIs to sort of help bridge the gap of some of the longer term things that you're thinking about and have spoken to us on a broad level about? I'm sure we could go into many more interesting dialogue on that topic offline, but can you share with us, are there any sort of other things happening under the surface to kind of help bridge the gaps with this step back that we're unfortunately having to take with affirmative action decision?
Sure, I can speak about a number of different things. Certainly, we're at Morehouse, and I think at other places, we're highly conscious of folks who filed amicus briefs and against the decision. And because we're highly conscious of them, we're reaching out and saying, okay, this decision happened, so you are on record saying that this is important, that it's essential for your success. Can you partner with us? And if you don't partner with us, certainly you can partner with a number of minority serving institutions to enable those outcomes to happen. So we are actually engaged in a campaign to do that. Now, that's at Morehouse, and I'm hoping other schools are doing that as well. I think what's also important, too, is as we are, of course, thinking about places like Harvard and North Carolina, who were the focus of the lawsuits, we are talking with different folks about, all right, well, at Morehouse College, we will be able to, and we plan on, of course, continuing our commitment. We also know that our students might need to go to graduate school. They may need to get some advanced training in order to get into certain fields. And so we're having those conversations as well about how you develop that pipeline. We're committed to doing that in a variety of different fields. So I think that goes a long way. Those are some of the partnerships there. We're trying so hard. This next year and a half, I think, is going to be critical when it comes to really making sense and really establishing things. Because if we can make some movement in this year and a half, I think that can lay foundation for what's going to happen later. So we're trying to do something, but I hope that's a broad-based effort, not just one school. I know it's not just one school. UNCF, I know, is trying to do something. United Negro College Fund is also trying to do something, or other organizations are too. But I appreciate the question, because it's going to take a lot of coalitions to really, really address things and where we go with things, where we go with the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to speak with us today. This is more of a statement and just a concern of why we thought it was so important to hear from you. When I think about us as communications professionals and protecting the brand, to your point, there is a short term, in the middle, and then long term. And I think a lot about what that long term means. And earlier today, we talked a lot about business acumen, about being a business partner first, and then a communications coming second. And so what I think about is, as I work with our CHRO and the person is in talent recruitment, part of my job in protecting the brand is looking long term to say, a decision like this that's impacting us short term, that makes us want to go back and look at our recruitment efforts right now, and how do we prepare for that? Because you're right, the pipeline may look different.
Yeah.
It may become much harder. And what we heard today, especially in the business acumen session, diversity of thought is important. We want that at the table. We know we're in this VUCA environment. It's not going to change anytime soon. So making sure that we're prepping for the future and talking to our HR leaders and saying, what does this mean for us? Not today, but what does it mean a year from now? Do we need to prep our programs differently? Do we need to have different type of programs? It's something that I think as communications professionals we should be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, it's all about having a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And so if you can get the diverse minds to come in and all focus on one business problem together, think about how powerful that is from a brain power perspective. So it's not about, having brown faces sitting around the table. It's about how do you stay competitive as an organization. Diversity is a great way to do that.
Agreed. Yeah. Absolutely agree. Thank you.
Any more questions before we wrap up? Well, thank you guys so much. You're a great audience. Good looking